My name is Laura, and here's how my story begins.
We gave your wedding fund to your sister. She deserves a real wedding, Dad said proudly. I didn't cry. I looked at my fiancé. He stood up, pulled out his phone, and said, "Should I tell them what I do for a living, Laura?" My sister's smile disappeared. I always thought family meant something sacred. Growing up in suburban Ohio, my parents raised my older sister Miranda and me with what they call traditional values. Work hard, be humble, respect your elders. I followed every rule they ever set colored inside every line and still somehow ended up as the family disappointment. Miranda was born first, and from the moment I entered this world, 18 months later, I existed in her shadow. She was the pretty one, the social one, the daughter who knew how to command a room. I was quiet, bookish, more comfortable with spreadsheets than small talk. Our mother Claudia never missed an opportunity to compare us, always finding me lacking in some fundamental way. My father Raymond operated differently. He wasn't cruel so much as absent, emotionally checked out in the way that men of his generation often were. He provided financially and considered his parental duties fulfilled. When it came to actually showing up for school plays or parent-teacher conferences, he delegated those responsibilities to my mother, who attended Miranda's events religiously while finding convenient excuses to miss mine. The summer I turned 12, Miranda won a local beauty pageant. My parents threw her a celebration that lasted an entire weekend. That same month, I placed first in the state math competition. My mother mentioned it once at dinner, then changed the subject to discuss Miranda's upcoming dance recital. I learned early that accomplishments didn't matter if they weren't the right kind of accomplishments. Miranda excelled at being seen, at making our parents look good in front of their country club friends. I excelled at things that happened behind closed doors in classrooms and laboratories where nobody important was watching. College separated us geographically, but not psychologically. Miranda attended a state school nearby, close enough to come home every weekend and maintain her position as the favored daughter. I received a full scholarship to MIT, a fact my mother explained to her friends as me being too smart for her own good rather than anything worth celebrating. Those 4 years in Massachusetts transformed me. For the first time, I found myself surrounded by people who valued intelligence, who saw my analytical mind as an asset rather than a social liability. I double majored in computer science and finance, graduated summa cum laude, and landed a position at a hedge fund that recruited directly from campus. Miranda, meanwhile, bounced through 3 different majors before settling on communications. She graduated with a mediocre GPA and moved back home where she worked a series of administrative jobs that never quite stuck. Our parents blamed her employers for not recognizing her potential. They blamed me for not coming home more often. The disparity in our life trajectories should have shifted family dynamics. It didn't. Every holiday I returned, for every awkward dinner I endured, I remained the difficult daughter who had abandoned her family for some incomprehensible career on the East Coast. Miranda remained the golden child who needed just a little more support, a little more understanding, a little more money to get back on her feet. I met Garrett at a conference in Chicago when I was 28. He was presenting research on algorithmic trading strategies, speaking to a packed auditorium with the quiet confidence of someone who knew his subject intimately. I approached him afterward with questions about his methodology, expecting a technical conversation. Instead, I found myself having dinner with him, then breakfast the next morning, then planning my next trip to Chicago before I even boarded my flight home. Garrett came from money, though you wouldn't know it from talking to him. His grandfather had founded a manufacturing company in the Midwest, building it from a single factory into an industrial empire. His father had expanded into technology, diversifying the family holdings into venture capital and private equity. Garrett had rejected the expected path of joining the family business, choosing instead to earn his own way through academia and eventually founding his own quantitative investment firm. We dated long distance for 2 years before he proposed. By then, I had left the hedge fund to join his company as a partner, combining my analytical skills with his market intuition to build something remarkable. Our firm managed over $3 billion in assets. We had offices in Chicago, New York, and London. I had become, without ever intending, to genuinely wealthy. My family knew none of this. They knew I worked in finance, some vague understanding that I did something with computers and numbers. They had never asked for details, never shown interest in understanding what I actually did. When I mentioned moving to Chicago, my mother's only comment was concern about how far away that would take me from Ohio. When I mentioned Garrett, she asked if he was Catholic. I kept my financial situation private deliberately. Years of being dismissed had taught me that sharing good news only invited criticism. If I mentioned a promotion, my mother would worry I was working too hard. If I mentioned a bonus, my father would lecture me about responsibility. If I mentioned anything that suggested my life was going well, Miranda would find a way to redirect the conversation to her own struggles. The secrecy became a kind of armor protection against the constant disappointment of hoping for acknowledgement that never came. When our firm made its first major acquisition, I told no one in my family. When financial magazines started requesting interviews, I declined the ones that would have reached Ohio. When we opened the London office, expanding into European markets with a team of 40 analysts, I mentioned only that work was keeping me busy. Garrett found this compartmentalization fascinating and slightly tragic. His own family, for all their complications, celebrated achievements openly. His mother had framed every article written about him, displayed them in her sitting room like trophies. His father called after every successful quarter, offering congratulations that came without strings attached. The contrast with my experience baffled him initially, though he came to understand it as our relationship deepened. We talked about it once, lying in bed after a particularly difficult phone call with my mother. She had spent 40 minutes discussing Miranda's latest career setback without once asking about my life. Garrett wanted to know why I tolerated it, why I kept answering calls that left me feeling hollowed out. The answer was complicated. Part of me still harbored hope that things might change, that some future conversation might finally break through the patterns we had established. Another part felt obligated by the cultural expectations around family, the belief that blood connections deserve maintenance, regardless of how painful they became. And somewhere beneath all of that, lurked the little girl who still wanted her mother to be proud of her, still believed that the right accomplishment might finally earn the approval she craved. Garrett listened without judgment, then offered an observation that stayed with me for years afterward. He suggested that my parents had confused Miranda's neediness for closeness. She required constant attention, constant support, constant intervention in her perpetual crisis. That dependency felt like intimacy to them, like proof of their importance in her life. My self-sufficiency, meanwhile, registered as distance, as rejection, as evidence that I didn't need them enough to truly love them. The insight reframed everything I thought I understood about my childhood. My independence hadn't been a character flaw they punished. It had been a threat to their sense of purpose. By not needing them, I had denied them the role they valued most. Miranda, by contrast, gave them endless opportunities to feel essential. Understanding this didn't make the rejection hurt less, but it shifted the location of the wound. The problem had never been my inadequacy. The problem had been a mismatch between who I was and who they needed me to be. No amount of achievement could bridge that gap, because achievement was precisely what they found threatening. Garrett understood this dynamic better than anyone. His own family had their complications, old money tensions, and expectations he had spent decades navigating. He never pushed me to share more with my parents than I was comfortable sharing. He simply loved me, supported me, and waited patiently for me to decide how much of our life together I wanted to reveal. The engagement announcement went about as well as expected. My mother's first question was about the ring, specifically whether it was big enough to photograph well. My father wanted to know if Garrett could afford to support me properly, the assumption being that any husband of mine would need to carry the financial burden. Miranda squealed with excitement that felt performed, already positioning herself as maid of honor before I had asked anyone. We planned a small ceremony, just close friends and immediate family. Neither Garrett nor I wanted spectacle. We had discussed eloping more than once, the appeal of avoiding family drama almost outweighing our desire to celebrate with the people we actually cared about. In the end, we compromised on an intimate gathering, 50 guests maximum, at a historic venue in Chicago that Garrett's family had used for generations. My parents had promised years ago to contribute to both daughters' weddings. The amount discussed was $50,000, each money they had supposedly set aside when Miranda and I were children. I never expected them to honor that promise for me, but when my mother called to discuss wedding planning, she brought up the fund unprompted. She wanted input on everything. The venue wasn't traditional enough. The guest list was too small. The date conflicted with something Miranda had planned months later. I deflected and compromised and bit my tongue, telling myself that enduring her interference was worth maintaining family peace. 3 months before the wedding, my parents asked us to come to Ohio for a family dinner. My mother said she wanted to discuss logistics to coordinate schedules to ensure everything was perfect for our special day. I should have recognized the signs. My mother never cared about logistics. She cared about control. The dinner started normally enough. My father grilled steaks while my mother fussed over place settings. Miranda arrived late as always, accompanied by her boyfriend of the moment, a man named Quentin, who sold pharmaceutical equipment and laughed too loudly at his own jokes. She had been dating him for approximately 6 weeks, which in Miranda's world constituted a serious relationship. We made it through the main course before my father cleared his throat with a particular gravity that signaled an announcement. I set down my fork, already bracing for whatever was coming. My mother spoke first, her voice carrying that sympathetic tone she used when delivering news she had already decided was for everyone's benefit. She explained that Miranda and Quentin had gotten engaged just last week, a whirlwind romance that proved true love existed. The wedding would be in 4 months, a grand affair at the country club where my parents had been members for 30 years. Miranda wanted a spring ceremony with 300 guests and a live band and imported flowers. Miranda extended her hand across the table, displaying a ring that sparkled under the dining room chandelier. The diamond was modest by the standards I had grown accustomed to, perhaps a carat and a half set in white gold with small accent stones along the band. She wiggled her fingers to catch the light glancing at my own engagement ring, with barely concealed comparison. My ring was understated by design, a family heirloom from Garrett's grandmother that we had chosen together over flashier modern options. The center stone was a pale blue sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds, beautiful but not ostentatious. Miranda had always assumed this simplicity reflected financial constraints. She couldn't conceive of choosing modesty when extravagance was available. Quentin beamed beside her, clearly pleased with himself for securing such a prize. He had the polished confidence of someone who had succeeded in sales, every gesture calculated to project success. His suit was expensive but slightly too tight, his watch large enough to be noticed from across the room. I recognized the type immediately, having encountered dozens of men like him in professional settings. They performed prosperity rather than embodying it. The conversation that followed painted a picture of the wedding Miranda envisioned. She had already contacted florists and caterers, already scheduled appointments at bridal boutiques, already assembled a Pinterest board with over 300 pins. The planning consumed her entirely, leaving little room for questions about whether this accelerated timeline made sense. Nobody asked how well she actually knew Quentin, what his family background entailed, whether they had discussed fundamental compatibility issues like finances and children and long-term goals. The engagement existed as a social event, rather than the beginning of a shared life, a party to plan, rather than a partnership to build. I offered congratulations, genuine ones, despite my reservations about a marriage built on 6 weeks of acquaintance. Miranda beamed, already launched into descriptions of color schemes and dress designs. I waited for the other shoe to drop, knowing instinctively that this announcement wasn't the real purpose of the evening. My father took over, then his tone shifting to the business-like register he used when discussing money. The wedding fund, he explained, had been reconsidered. Given the circumstances, given Miranda's needs, given the difference in scale between her planned celebration and mine, my parents had decided to consolidate resources. I watched his mouth form the words without fully processing them. The $50,000 promised to me would be redirected to Miranda's wedding. She deserved a real celebration, my mother added, a proper wedding that would make the family proud. My small gathering with its limited guest list didn't require the same investment. The silence that followed stretched across the dinner table like something physical. Miranda studied her engagement ring, suddenly fascinated by its sparkle. Quentin shifted uncomfortably, perhaps sensing he had wandered into something beyond his understanding. Garrett sat completely still beside me, his expression unreadable. My father smiled, then proud of his decisiveness. Confident he had solved a problem that never should have been his to solve. He waited for gratitude, for acceptance, for the compliance I had offered my entire life. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't deliver the speech I had been rehearsing in my head for 20 years about favoritism and unfairness and all the ways they had failed me as parents. Instead, I turned to Garrett, meeting his eyes with a question I didn't need to speak aloud. He understood immediately. He stood up slowly, pulling out his phone with the deliberate calm of someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment. His voice was quiet when he spoke, almost conversational. "Should I tell them what I do for a living, Laura?" Miranda's smile disappeared. Something flickered across her face. uncertainty mixing with the first hints of concern. She knew nothing about Garrett beyond the basic facts I had shared: his name, his general location, his apparent adequacy as a partner. My parents knew even less. Garrett let the question hang in the air for a moment before continuing. He explained that he ran an investment firm, one of the largest privately held quantitative funds in the country. He mentioned the assets under management, the offices around the world, the client list that included sovereign wealth funds and university endowments and family offices of people whose names appeared on buildings. He explained that I wasn't his employee, but his partner, that I held an equal stake in a company worth considerably more than my parents' entire retirement portfolio. He shared numbers that made my father's face cycle through disbelief, calculation, and something approaching nausea. He described our apartment in Chicago, the vacation properties we had discussed purchasing, the philanthropic foundation we were establishing. The revelation landed like a controlled demolition, taking down years of assumptions in seconds. My mother's mouth opened and closed without producing sound. My father looked at me as if seeing a stranger who had been sitting at his dinner table for decades. Miranda dropped her fork with a clatter that seemed amplified in the sudden quiet. Her face cycled through expressions I had never witnessed before, each one revealing a different layer of the assumption structure collapsing inside her mind. First came confusion, the simple inability to process information that contradicted everything she believed. Then disbelief, the reflexive rejection of facts too uncomfortable to accept. Then something darker crept in, a dawning horror as implications unfolded. For 30 years, she had operated under the certainty that she was the successful sister, the one who had figured out how life worked, while I fumbled through existence with my books and computers. My quiet lifestyle had confirmed this narrative. My small apartment in Chicago, my reluctance to discuss work, my simple clothing, and understated jewelry, all of it had reinforced her belief in her own superiority. Now that foundation crumbled beneath her, and she had nothing to grab onto. Every condescending comment she had ever made about my choices ricocheted back with new meaning. Every time she had pitied my circumstances, she had been pitying a fiction of her own creation. Quentin looked between family members with a dawning realization that he had walked into something far more complicated than a simple dinner. His earlier confidence evaporated as the numbers Garrett mentioned sank in. He had positioned himself as a catch, a successful pharmaceutical sales representative who could provide Miranda with comfort. In this new context, his achievements shrank to insignificance. My father recovered first, his business mind latching on to the concrete details Garrett had shared. He started asking questions, rapid-fire inquiries about market strategies and client acquisition and regulatory compliance. The interrogation masked something vulnerable, a desperate attempt to establish himself as a peer rather than someone who had badly misjudged his own daughter. I watched him scramble to reframe the relationship, to position himself as a mentor figure who might offer valuable guidance. The irony was almost unbearable. This man, who had never asked a single substantive question about my career, now wanted to discuss portfolio diversification and risk management. I watched my sister's expression transform through stages of recognition. She understood now why I had never asked them for money, never complained about student loans, never expressed any financial stress, despite living in one of the most expensive cities in the country. She understood that the power dynamic she had counted on the struggling little sister who would always need help while she maintained her position as the family star had never existed. Garrett wasn't finished. He pulled up our company website on his phone, showing them the press coverage, the industry awards, the profile in Forbes that had run 6 months earlier. He wasn't bragging so much as documenting, building a case that couldn't be dismissed as exaggeration. My mother found her voice first attempting to pivot toward reconciliation. She said she was proud of me, that she had always known I would accomplish great things. The sudden warmth in her tone felt like sandpaper against everything I had endured. I spoke then, finally choosing my words with a precision that had served me well in business negotiations. I thanked them for making their priorities so clear. I explained that Garrett and I would be covering our own wedding, as we had always planned to do. I mentioned that the celebration we had envisioned would cost considerably more than $50,000, and we were happy to fund every cent ourselves. The mention of money seemed to break something in my father's composure. He began calculating aloud, wondering what else he didn't know, wondering what opportunities he had missed by never bothering to understand his younger daughter's life. His questions tumbled out in a stream that revealed exactly where his values lay. Garrett answered some of them with the same calm he had maintained throughout. Yes, we were comfortable. No, we didn't need anything from them. Yes, we had already established trusts and estate plans that reflected our actual financial situation. Miranda sat in rigid silence, her engagement ring suddenly less impressive than it had seemed 20 minutes earlier. Quentin looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on the planet. I almost felt sorry for him, an innocent bystander caught in 30 years of family dysfunction. My mother began crying, then the practiced tears she deployed whenever situations didn't unfold according to her preferences. She didn't understand why I had hidden this from them, why I had let them believe I was struggling when I had clearly succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. The accusation embedded in her grief was familiar. Once again, I had done something wrong by not performing according to her script. I stood up, pushing back from the table with the finality of a closing door. I told them the wedding fund had never been about money for me. It had been about acknowledgement, about proof that I mattered as much as Miranda, about evidence that my parents could see me as something other than an afterthought. Their decision to redirect those funds had answered that question definitively. I thanked them for their honesty, for finally making explicit what had always been implicit. At least now we could all stop pretending. Garrett and I left before dessert, walking out of my childhood home with a strange lightness that accompanies liberation. In the car, he reached for my hand, squeezing gently without speaking. There was nothing to say that we hadn't already communicated in the dining room. The drive back to our hotel took 40 minutes. I spent most of it staring out the window at the Ohio landscape I had worked so hard to escape, feeling the complicated grief of finally accepting what I had always known. My parents would never love me the way they loved Miranda. No amount of success would change that fundamental truth. 3 days later, my mother called with an apology that wasn't really an apology. She explained that they hadn't understood the situation, that they would, of course, honor their original commitment to my wedding, that they hoped we could move past this misunderstanding. My father got on the line to offer investment advice, suddenly eager to discuss my financial strategies. I declined both the money and the guidance. I explained that we didn't need their contribution, that our wedding would proceed exactly as planned, that they were welcome to attend as guests, but nothing more. The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. Miranda texted me a week after that, fishing for information about our company, asking questions about investment opportunities for her and Quentin. I responded politely but briefly, offering no opening for the relationship she suddenly wanted to cultivate. The wedding happened on a perfect September afternoon in the venue we had chosen, with the people we actually wanted present. My parents sat in the second row, noticeably uncomfortable among guests whose net worth exceeded most small nations. Miranda served as a bridesmaid rather than maid of honor, that position having gone to my college roommate, who had been there through every family crisis of my 20s. Garrett's vows mentioned our partnership, both professional and personal, the way we had built something remarkable together through trust and mutual respect. My vows talked about finding home in a person rather than a place, about the freedom that comes from being truly seen. We honeymooned in Patagonia, hiked glaciers, watched whales breach in channels between mountains. For 2 weeks we existed without family complications, without old wounds requiring attention. I came back to Chicago feeling lighter than I had in years. The distance gave me perspective I hadn't possessed in the immediate aftermath of the dinner confrontation. Standing at the edge of a glacier, watching ancient ice cave into milky water, I found myself thinking about time differently. The family drama that had consumed my emotional energy for decades suddenly seemed smaller, less permanent, just another temporary formation in a landscape that would continue reshaping itself long after all of us were gone. Garrett and I talked about the future during those hikes, mapping out not just business plans, but life plans. We discussed where we wanted to be in 10 years, what kind of parents we hoped to become, how we wanted to balance ambition with presence. These conversations felt different from any I had experienced before, grounded in genuine partnership rather than performance. On our last night in South America, sitting by a fire in a remote lodge accessible only by boat, Garrett asked me what I wanted my relationship with my family to look like going forward. The question deserved serious consideration rather than the reflexive dismissal I might have offered weeks earlier. I thought about my parents growing older, about the grandchildren they might someday want to know about, deathbed regrets and funeral guilt, and all the complicated emotions that family arrangements eventually produce. I didn't want to carry bitterness into my future, didn't want to model resentment for children who hadn't yet been born. But I also couldn't pretend that the wounds didn't exist, couldn't manufacture forgiveness that hadn't been earned. The answer I eventually articulated was about boundaries rather than bridges. I would remain available for connection on terms that protected my well-being. I would respond to genuine overtures without initiating contact myself. I would attend family gatherings when the cost seemed manageable and excuse myself when it didn't. Most importantly, I would stop trying to change people who had demonstrated repeatedly their commitment to remaining unchanged. Garrett listened to this entire framework without interrupting, then asked a single clarifying question. He wanted to know what would constitute a genuine overture versus a manipulative one. The distinction mattered because my mother excelled at performing reconciliation, without actually reconciling at saying the words of apology, while communicating continued blame through tone and implication. I didn't have a perfect answer, but I knew I would recognize the difference when I encountered it. Genuine change would feel different. In my body would produce relief rather than tension, would leave me feeling seen rather than managed. Until that happened, I would maintain cordial distance and protect my peace. The aftermath unfolded gradually over the following months. My parents' attempts at reconnection grew more persistent as they processed the magnitude of what they had misunderstood. My mother started calling weekly, asking about our lives with an interest she had never shown before. My father sent emails about market trends, attempting to position himself as a peer rather than an authority. I maintained cordial distance, responding to their outreach without encouraging deeper engagement. Some bridges once burned don't rebuild easily. The trust they had shattered wasn't something a few apologetic phone calls could restore. Miranda's wedding happened as scheduled, a lavish affair that my parents funded entirely. I attended as a guest, gave a generic toast, watched my sister marry a man she barely knew. The marriage lasted 14 months before Quentin left for a coworker he had been seeing since before the engagement. The divorce devastated Miranda, stripping away the fairy tale she had constructed around her life. She called me crying, seeking comfort from the sister she had dismissed for decades. I listened, offered practical advice, helped her find a good attorney. I was kind but not close, present but not invested. The calls came at all hours during those first terrible weeks after Quentin's departure. Miranda had discovered evidence of his affair accidentally stumbling across text messages while borrowing his phone to take a picture. The betrayal shattered something fundamental in her understanding of herself, forced her to question every choice she had made in pursuit of the life she thought she wanted. I learned more about my sister during those conversations than I had in the previous 30 years combined. She talked about the pressure she had always felt to be perfect, the exhausting performance of effortless success that our parents had demanded. Every achievement had been a down payment on their continued approval, every setback a source of shame that required immediate correction. The parallels between our experiences surprised me. I had assumed Miranda enjoyed her favored status without complication, that being the golden child came with only benefits and no costs. But she had been trapped in her own way, confined by expectations just as limiting as the ones that had constrained me. Where I had been dismissed for being different, she had been suffocated by the need to conform. Where I had learned to survive without parental approval, she had learned to depend on it entirely. The discovery of this shared damage didn't erase our history, but it complicated the simple narrative I had constructed. I helped her through the divorce proceedings, connecting her with professionals who could protect her interests. The settlement negotiations revealed that Quentin had been less financially successful than he had appeared, that his lifestyle had been funded largely by credit and optimism. Miranda emerged with little material wealth but clearer vision about what actually mattered. Something shifted in her during that difficult year. The sister who had always needed external validation began developing internal resources. She started therapy, started examining patterns she had never questioned, started building a sense of self that didn't depend on romantic partnership or parental praise. The transformation was gradual and incomplete, but it was real. Our grandmother Edith passed away the following spring, leaving inheritance distributions that revealed one final family secret. She had always favored me quietly, setting aside funds in a trust my parents had never known about. The amount was modest by my standards, but significant, symbolically proof that someone in my family had seen my worth all along. At the funeral, my Aunt Sylvia pulled me aside to share stories I had never heard. Apparently, Grandma Edith had kept track of my early accomplishments throughout my youth,
clipping newspaper articles about academic achievements like the state math competition, saving the announcement when I graduated from MIT. She had understood what my parents had missed. Even before my financial success recognized the diamond they kept mistaking for coal. I visit her grave sometimes when I'm in Ohio, leaving flowers and updates about the life she championed from afar. Those visits feel more meaningful than any interaction with my living relatives.
3 years after the wedding dinner revelation, my father had a health scare that forced him to retire early. The transition stripped away the professional identity he had wrapped around himself for decades, leaving him uncertain and diminished. He reached out to me more frequently after that, asking questions about my work, my marriage, my life, with what seemed like genuine curiosity. I still struggled to trust his interest. Decades of dismissal don't disappear because circumstances change, but I've softened slightly, allowing for the possibility that people can grow even late in life, even after causing tremendous harm. My mother remains fundamentally unchanged, still viewing the world through the lens of how it reflects on her. She has rewritten history to position herself as always supportive of my career, always proud of my accomplishments, always aware of my potential. The gaslighting would be infuriating if it weren't so predictable. Miranda and I have found an uneasy peace. Her divorce humbled her in ways success never could, forcing her to confront the hollowness of the persona she had constructed. She works now as an event planner, channeling her social skills into something productive. She's dating again more carefully this time, a teacher who seems genuinely kind. Garrett and I welcomed twins last year, a boy and a girl who will never experience the differential treatment that shaped my childhood. We've discussed extensively how to raise them with humility despite our wealth, how to ensure they understand that their value comes from who they are rather than what they have. My parents visit occasionally, playing the grandparent role with enthusiasm that would have warmed me once. Now, I watch their interactions with cautious appreciation, grateful they're trying, while remaining alert for old patterns. The children will know their grandparents without inheriting the dysfunction that defined my relationship with them. Looking back, that dinner table moment changed everything by changing nothing. My parents' favoritism wasn't news to me. Their explicit admission simply removed any remaining denial. Garrett's revelation didn't alter my worth. It simply forced everyone else to recognize what had always been true. The freedom I found came not from their approval, but from releasing my need for it. I spent 30 years seeking validation from people constitutionally incapable of providing it. The wedding fund incident finally broke that pattern, finally convinced me that my energy was better spent elsewhere. I built a remarkable life, despite my family's dismissal, not because of it. Every achievement came from my own effort, my own determination, my own refusal to accept the limitations they tried to impose. Their belated recognition feels less like vindication than confirmation of something I already knew. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Garrett hadn't spoken up that night. If we had simply absorbed their decision and moved on. Would I have eventually confronted the dynamic myself? Would I have continued swallowing resentment until it poisoned everything? The truth is that I needed an external catalyst, someone willing to fight for me when I had grown too exhausted to fight for myself. Garrett gave me that gift using his position to demand acknowledgement I had stopped expecting. His intervention didn't solve anything, but it created space for me to finally speak my own truth. My parents never explicitly apologized for giving my wedding fund to Miranda. They prefer to act as if that evening never happened, as if their relationship with me has always been supportive and warm. I've stopped expecting accountability from people who consider themselves incapable of wrongdoing. What I found instead is peace. The wedding fund saga ended something I had been carrying my entire life. The weight of trying to earn love that should have been freely given finally lifted from my shoulders. In its place, I discovered that the love I actually needed had been waiting in Chicago all along, in a partner who saw me clearly from the very beginning. The story I grew up believing about myself was wrong. I wasn't the difficult daughter, the disappointing child, the one who never quite measured up. I was simply different from what my parents expected. And rather than celebrating that difference, they spent 3 decades trying to diminish it. Their loss. Ultimately, the daughter they overlooked became someone extraordinary, built. Something lasting, found happiness they never predicted. The daughter they favored continued struggling to find her footing, still recovering from the entitlement they cultivated. I don't gloat about this reversal. Miranda's difficulties bring me no joy, but I also refuse to pretend that outcomes don't matter, that the choices my parents made didn't have consequences.
They bet on the wrong daughter, and now they live with the results of that gamble. My children will never know that version of their grandparents. They'll know the people my parents have become in old age, chastened and somewhat wiser, desperate to maintain connection with a daughter they once took for granted. Perhaps that's the best ending any of us could hope for. Not justice, but transformation. Not revenge, but growth.
The wedding fund was never really about $50,000. It was about being seen, being valued, being loved without conditions. When my parents failed that test, they freed me to find what I needed elsewhere. And what I found was worth infinitely more than anything they could have given.